All right, so for any of you watching, this is Coram Deo Conversations, where we have everyday conversations about simple stuff, but it ultimately connects back to theology, or who God is. So we got Anthony, Brother Anthony.
Brother
Tell,
Anthony.
tell the people about yourself.
The name is Anthony Gervasio. I've known Alex for quite a bit of time now, pre and post marriage and pre and post child, so that's pretty cool. I've ridden horses, they're fun. Uh, I like the beach, but I've never lived by the beach, and I love to cook. Cooking's
Right?
fun.
Yep, you're the chef in town.
Chefy boy.
You still doing your company?
Yeah, occasionally when things pop up, I've been doing well, I had 3 jobs cancel with coronavirus stuff. I had a wedding set up and a couple other gigs,
Yeah.
and everything just tapered off, which I expected it to. I was just like, well, there's one in particular I was really excited about, which was helping with cooking for like a, it was like a test Passover thing to teach people about Passover and everything about it.
Mm.
And when that fell through, I was really bummed out because that was the other ones. I was like, it's all right. I guess the money would have been cool, but that one in particular was like, that would have been a really cool opportunity. So kind of a bummer that it didn't work out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've been to a couple Passover meals. Those are really interesting to go to.
Yeah, the last one I went was I don't know if you were there, if you were around at the time, but I went to your parents' friends one.
Yeah, yeah, they still do that almost
Yeah,
every year.
they're cool.
Yep,
They're always
definitely.
fun to talk to.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's your topic? What do you want to talk about today?
We are going to talk about rocks and minerals and gemstones,
Nice.
which kind of are all lumped into the same thing. It's all
Yeah,
just based on chemical makeup stuff, but they're all rocks.
yeah. I was thinking about, starting with a really cliche, like rock on, dude. You know the people like that. The cheese.
Oh, got to lay it on thick.
So what gives you, I don't know, enjoyment, satisfaction about rocks? What got you into it in the first place?
So it's this will be all new information for you in particular, which is cool. Uh, kind of know an aspect of me or a facet. Look, that's rock stuff for just portions about me that you definitely haven't heard of. But I became really fascinated with rocks when I was really, really little. I would kind of do the typical like backyard exploration that a lot of kids do, and go and collect all different kind of rocks, and would do so going through washes and doing whatever. It was a lot of fun. And my parents saw how much I was enjoying it, and they've always kind of been into gemstones and that kind of stuff anyway. So part of it was like a self exploration, and part of it was uh, it was like a nurturing from parents. And once that was kind of established, we would go to like rock and mineral and gem shows together. One in particular that happens in Cottonwood every year, and I went every year for a good long time. And now I go sporadically, but it's still fun to head out there. There's another one that happens in Quartzsite, uh,
Hmm.
both in Arizona, if anyone's questioning where that is. But yeah, it's a really interesting community. There's lots of different applications for rocks, minerals, gemstones. I really liked it for the kind of science-y aspect of it and the cultural aspect. Because, I mean, there's a lot of, like, interesting spirituality and adornment that comes with gemstones that people are so obsessed, which is so interesting. That it's like, oh, that's just some rock from the ground, but it's like, no, but this is my rock. I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I mean, Sedona, right, is like this vortex for people.
Yeah.
The rock there is so unique, and yeah, totally.
Definitely. And so, yeah, I don't have any with me to share because a lot of it's at my parents', but I do have a lot of stuff, a lot of gemstones and a lot of things I've collected over the years. Some that are more like fossilized things, which are still considered rocks, like petrified wood, which is crazy and cool. We have a whole forest of it here in Arizona. And also things like amber, which, do you know what that is? Amber?
I mean, kind of vaguely.
So it's tree sap that's been fossilized.
Okay,
And what's really, really cool about that is the DNA from different, like, insects and such can sometimes be found in them, and they'll be fossilized in the tree sap itself, and it's all see-through. So, and those are the ones that are really expensive, just because it's kind of like, oh, here's a fossil with a bug in it that's see-through. It's not a everyday thing that you kind of see, but the stuff is fascinating, and it's like super light. It feels really strange in your hand because you don't realize how the density is like so little.
Yeah. And what kind of makes? I mean, you said it's kind of like rare. Or is it valuable? Is it valuable? Does it cost like a lot of money, or?
So amber is plentiful enough, but it becomes rare based on what is fossilized in the amber with it.
Okay.
So if you have like a group of bugs in there, its value spikes considerably, which is interesting because it's one of those things where, out of context, talking about someone wearing a pendant with a bunch of bugs in it sounds kind of gross. But when you actually look at the perceived value and rarity that people will hold for something like that, it like totally changes the context.
Yeah, I mean, I'd almost see it as like those lollipops that have the scorpions in it.
I was gonna say it's very similar to that.
Yeah, and that is, we have so much of that in Arizona. Like, you remember rawhide, where you dig for gold?
I would go all the time. Yeah.
We have so much like that. Just things about rocks, and I think the scorpion in the lollipop is supposed to symbolize amber, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Because
we're very rock-obsessed state and culture. Even we have rock and gem shops that you could just go and buy whatever. It can get pretty pricey depending on what you want.
Yeah, totally. Why do you think there is that lure to rocks and the spirituality type connection?
Well, for one, I think there's nothing else like it on Earth. It's so natural. It's not anything that you have to produce these interesting pinks and purples and greens that you wouldn't really see anywhere else, but just directly from the stones. There's some rock tumbling and stuff occasionally that happens to polish the stones and whatnot, but still with their base color, it's so fascinating and really cool. I mean, seeing some of the mines in particular, I've been to one mine. I'd love to go visit some more, but seen plenty of pictures online of amethyst mines in particular. It's a purple stone, and you just see the walls like covered in them, and it's fascinating. And I think that the spirituality comes into play with this kind of drawing to the earth, drawing to like some kind of greater purpose that comes from this, because it comes from the ground. It's this natural element, and it I think for a lot of people it amounts to there being this desire for something more than just a rock in the ground. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, and just the fact that there's these colors, like I don't think you see these types of colors in anything else, right? I mean,
exactly.
The green and the blue and the reds and purple, the amethyst. Yeah, I've seen those. And yeah, just the color is so unlike anything. I mean, pretty much the closest I can think of is probably like fruit, you know, that's closest to just bright, unique colors.
Yeah, but even like for sure. But even like compared to fruit, so much rock and stuff was historically known, used for paints and used for art, that they would grind it down to a powder and then mix that with like a composite to be able to paint with it. Particular ones like cinnabar, which makes this really, really bright red, which was kind of one of the paradigms for red pigment for a long, long time, for probably a couple hundred years of using it, as well as blues and purples that you would normally not see in clothing, and if you did, it would be the royalty, because they were so hard to come by, the pigments themselves. But some people would try and use gemstones like lapis lazuli, which is like a nice bright blue. But I mean, color alone is so fascinating with rocks, and just the use of them, from paints to art to adornment. It's just such a wide cast net.
Yeah, totally. It's crazy.
For real.
And the you know, people really love birthstones.
Yes.
And I was you know, researching on that. So what do you know about birthstones? Do you know the origin and everything?
I think it's probably some kind of crock, but I don't know. Yeah. I know my birthstone is a garnet.
Okay. I know mine's a diamond, April.
Nice. I think it's one of those things potentially put in place for sales. I'm presuming that it's because you look at the gemstone list and none of them are like particularly inexpensive. They're all like, oh, here's a pearl, here's a diamond, here's a garnet. If you love your wife, you should buy her this for her birthday, or this for an anniversary. And it's potentially like a pressuring thing. I mean, even if you look back, I particularly like the videos that Adam Ruins Everything has done with diamonds, and mentioning the truth behind the matter of diamonds not being as difficult or rare as they seem to reflect in their cost, but it's really because there's basically one or two companies that hold all the diamonds and kind of process them, all the natural diamonds. And they were also the ones to put in place the cost amount that would be for a diamond ring and stuff for marriage, and would kind of market it as, don't you think your wife deserves something like this? And the wife's like, yeah, I definitely deserve something like that. And they would make it be like a 3-month salary, which was like always been the thing. And that wasn't even created by anyone. That was literally created by the companies who like were behind it. And they're like, yeah, no, this is the cost of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So with that being said, rocks are priceless, but maybe they're more worthless.
Yeah.
In some regard, because it's like you could actually charge whatever you want if you put enough significance behind it. And
Right.
with marriage in particular, it's for a lot of people the most significant thing they ever do in their life.
Yeah. For real.
Yeah.
I read about diamonds, how they pretty much form under about 60 miles under Earth. Is that right?
Yeah. I think it's about that. I'm not positive, but I know it's deep. The pressure's magnificent.
Yeah. That's from like Phoenix to Black Canyon City.
Yeah, which
But dude,
for anyone that doesn't know Phoenix, it's it's a good distance between the two.
Yep. Yeah, for real. That's pretty crazy. So
Yeah.
I did a little research on birthstones and
Yeah.
stuff, and so it is true that a lot of people have grabbed these stones and marketed them, just for their own profit, essentially.
Right.
But it has gone back because it's 12 gems. It
Right.
was at one point connected to the 12 apostles.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, so it says the traditional birthstones, I got this from gemsociety.org. Traditional birthstones originate from Poland in 16th century. So, those 12 gemstones, since it's one for each month, was signifying the 12 apostles for each month. And it says Josephus and St. Jerome began linking gems with like signs of zodiac and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it must have been maybe some bit of, I don't know, strange beliefs, but connected with this spirituality back then and around like Middle Ages, medieval time.
Yeah, probably why it's persisted so much.
Yeah. I think it was popularized for market reasons in Poland, 16th century.
Right.
So
I don't really remember any kind of Polish exports, so historically, so that was probably their niche.
Yeah.
Especially at that time.
Yeah. Well, so have you seen the Bloodstone?
Bloodstone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this green. They have like a green hue with red dots in it.
Yeah.
And so that one in medieval times was to symbolize like the crucifixion, because
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like the blood of Christ dropping down onto the green earth, and it being that sign of life, amidst the death of Christ. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. But okay, so you started learning this about rocks and getting into it when you were really young.
Yeah, I was like 7 or 8.
7 or 8, okay. How fast did it take you to read your first book?
Read my first book. So when I was even younger, around this is the books that I remember. I mean, I would also make my mom and dad like read tons of books every night. I'm like, oh, just read one more. Read this other book. Read this one too. And they could tell you great stories about that. But when I was around 4 and I was starting to go to the library with my mom, I was fascinated with space. And so I would always get books on space. And like it helped really build my vocabulary because I wasn't just getting like little kid books. I was getting like the heavier stuff.
Mhm.
And it took a while. I'm sure it took a while at first. I have no recollection of that. It's so long ago. But I would get the nonfiction books and start like eating through them. And then, I would like research different terms with my parents and they'd be like, oh, this is what that means. And that was like a really good baseline into like reading in general, I think, or getting me there anyway. But I mean, I absolutely love reading, as we've discussed before, and I
Yep.
can read pretty quickly.
Yep. Yeah, for any of you who don't know, I asked that question on purpose because Anthony is a voracious reader. So, yeah, I mean, obviously you've researched a lot on rocks. What
Yeah.
do you think is the coolest thing you know about rocks?
Coolest thing I know. And there's a bunch of cool things. It's harder
Top
to narrow
5.
that down. One thing that's really cool is the Mohs scale, MOHS, named after the guy who created it. It's a hardness scale, and with the hardness ranging from 1 to 10, and 10 being diamond being the hardest natural material that we have on Earth. They actually use diamond like dusted blades to cut diamonds. They literally have to use diamonds to cut diamonds, which is crazy and really cool.
Yeah.
because
You know what?
because it's so hard.
So actually at the place I worked at, the lawnmower shop, they would have carbide tips, and you have to use a diamond wheel to cut them for chainsaws. So
seriously, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
Even though I'm probably ignorant to all the other operations with that, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
So that scale is really cool, and it goes all the way down to like talc and gypsum, which, if you know talcum powder, being like baby powder,
Okay.
basically a rock you're putting on your baby.
Yeah, I didn't even know that actually.
Yeah.
It is a rock.
Mm-hmm. And like I have a couple pieces of it, and if you like kind of press pretty hard with your hands, like it just like kind of powderizes. That's not the word, but that's the word I'm gonna use. Powderize.
Powderize.
So those things are pretty cool. There's this one stone called has a lot of cultural significance to Native Americans, particularly the Apache Indians, called Apache's Tear. And they're like little round black, like jet black gemstones, and they're called that because since they're like these little black drops of whatever to signify Apache Indians going along the Trail of Tears, and those being the fossilized tears of them that were like well preserved, which is really interesting. A rock that really stands for oppression. And actually, the ones that are considered more valuable and more rare is if you hold them to the light and you can see like you can kind of see through it, which is even more so like related to like the tear aspect of it. It's like the tear's on the inside because I could see through it. Those are really cool.
Because it's black, but you can see through the black rock.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I'll have to show you those sometime. I have some of those. They're pretty rad. Let me dig up another one. Moldavite. There's we do not have that rock on Earth until it came down by asteroid.
Mm.
And it's this that one in particular is kind of hyper spiritualized, particularly in the kind of new age community, because it's this touch with outer space, and it's like come to Earth to us, and we are to take that and work it in like a way to glorify ourselves or something. I don't know, but it's really it feels like it's kind of space agey because it's this like opaque green that you can like sort of see through, and it feels like it's it feels very alien, which is really the cool aspect about it, because it's because it is that like that weird like sort of see-through green but sort of not. It feels very space agey, and kind of it's probably because of the elaboration of movies and the way that that's been kind of portrayed. Space stuff, but still it's fascinating and really cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
man. So you're at 3. You're at 3 right now.
I'm at 3. Alrighty, let's well, I want to bring this one up just because I think it's so cool, and the amount of ways that we the value of it, once it was really, really valuable, the most valuable substance on Earth, and now it's like not valuable at all because it's so prominent, is salt. There were some African tribes in particular that were these like salt kings, and it was because everyone's food was so bland, and it was found to like flavor their food. And these African kings would have these just massive, incredible like measure of wealth and gold, everything. I mean, there's some like really interesting facts about it. Like really, I can't recall any, but I just remember it being like super, super opulent, and just there being this like crazy abundance, and that's from salt. That's stuff that we can buy like 7-8 cents a pound sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
But it was like equivalent of gold, or potentially worth more than gold, which is usually we have that kind of gold standard of being one of the most expensive things around, being a mineral. And we can get salt from so many different methods now. There are salt mines that are around. I believe there's laboratory kind of made salt, but that's not usually like, because of the abundance on Earth, it's not really like used as much. But the chemical compound of salts doesn't have to be sodium chloride. There's other elements put together that are considered salts, but not ones that we would normally eat.
Yeah, I when I was in Israel, went to the Dead Sea, which I guess because of the salt concentration or something, the mud is good for you to rub all over your face and body and whatnot. I don't even know if that is true. But that's what we did. So we, rubbed mud all over ourselves, and it would burn. And then you go into the sea, and you're floating because the salt,
That's crazy.
cause you to be, float in the sea. So it was such a weird experience. But just the fact that salt, like something like salt, can change water like that.
Yeah.
It's
fascinating.
Yeah,
salt's pretty cool. I mean, we even there's some places that dehydrate seawater and take the salt from that for sea salt. There was this hilarious meme that I saw of someone who had purchased kind of Dead Sea salt that it was sold, and it said it's over 2,000 years old and whatever on the bottle, and then it had an expiration date on it. It's it's not going to go bad. It's salt. It's over 2,000 years, but it's in 2 months I got to finish it all, or otherwise it goes bad.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. All right. Well, now you got one more.
One more. Alrighty.
Coolest things about rocks.
One thing. This one is so interesting. I think speaks a lot to Arizona culture and westward expansion and the gold rush. And that is gold, fool's gold, and streak plates. So, do you know what a streak plate is?
No, but we definitely know fool's gold is. We have so much in Arizona. And the candy, everyone loves the fool's gold candy.
It's true, yeah. And there's so much gold-based tourist trap kind of things that are in whatever souvenir shop you go to, that'll have there will be something gold-based there. Whether it's something really hokey of a bag of things of little rocks that are just painted gold, that it was literally some dude who got a bag of rocks for a fish tank and just whipped out the gold spray paint and went to town on it, and it's you bought that. You own that now. It can have value to you, but it's also when you break it down, that's how it was made.
Yeah, no, exactly. All right, so I'm gonna guess on streak plate. Is it
okay?
So sometimes when the rocks break open, when we're up camping or something, you break open the rocks and it has this whole streak of gold. Is that what it is?
No, it is not. I like where your head's at. Not that was a clue because you were far, but that's not it. So a streak plate, it's like a ceramic tile. And the use for it is for particular rocks. Well, you can really use it for any rock, but the point of it is you take the rock and you you streak it on the streak plate to get a streak of the or you strike it, I guess, on a streak plate. So you get a streak of color on there, and a lot of times that color that you get will be one of the identifying factors on what kind of stone you found. And the reason why I pointed out with gold and fool's gold is that fool's gold will have the streak color of a gray or a charcoaly kind of color, but gold will be that yellow gold when you use a streak plate on it. And so that's one of those things that's actually a really solid indicator, because if you're using something like a metal detector, it's going to be yep, there's metal in there. You can't decide what it is from those. You can't always decide visually because they look so similar at times.
All right.
And people have died over fool's gold. which is
Yeah.
crazy. People
Yeah.
stumbling upon it and uh, getting greedy, so they murdered their partner or something like that, which is like so
Mm.
sad and so crazy, especially when it doesn't amount to anything in the end.
Yeah. Totally.
Mm.
So who like streak play is actually something that's made, right? It's not like
Um,
an actual.
I believe it's sold at some places, like marketed as that, but I think also people will just like buy a ceramic tile.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think it's like I think some of it's marketed and probably raised in price for a particular shape that is beloved by streak plate lovers and users. I'm sure there's some kind of measure to that, because everything's marketable, right? So it's to an extent anyway. Uh,
So how come it comes out as that color? Is it because of the ceramic tile, or is it because of what's in the gold? Or
it's
is there a chemical thing that happens, or what?
right. So it's because of what's in the gold or like the mineral itself. So the
Okay.
composition, because gold is actually an element as well as it being like a mineral. So gold is going to be very decidedly one thing, and it's going to be unchanging.
Hmm.
And if it does change, it's like, well, that's gold with something else in it as well.
Yeah.
But with something like fool's gold, it's a composite of a couple different elements, and so that mixture of things, even though it has that like metallic shine that or it's actually called luster, Lustre, in the rock and gem world. It has that metallic luster that a gold would have. It really fools people, but it's actually a different breakdown of elements.
Yeah, for real. All right, so what is your favorite rock?
My favorite rock. Hmm. I'm gonna have to think on that one a little bit. So there's a lot of cool ones. Hmm. I would say I'm gonna go for one that's a little simpler that I think people would be like people who are rock people would be a little disappointed in me saying, but I think it's so cool, are just quartz crystals.
Okay.
They're I have, and part of that is experience, and part of that is well, I'll just explain it, and you'll see what I mean.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another thing growing up that I would do is, especially in Wickenburg, good beds of them, which is also in Arizona for anyone who doesn't know. Uh, there are in the washes and stuff after a good rain. You can be searching and searching, and you can find quartz crystals in there that have like the tips that are you very much see from crystallized rocks and minerals. And there's something that draws you into gemstones and rocks a little bit more when you're searching for them yourself.
Yeah.
And especially, like, I mean, the first ones you pick up, you're like, look, I found some rocks, and they look terrible. They look like just like garbled up mess. They probably have like weird streaks through them and they're broken up, and you're like, but I found some, so that's really cool. But then but then you get to the point where you find ones that look clearer, and you're like, oh, that one looks really awesome. And then like eventually you've thrown away all those first ones you found and you just want to like find like the really high quality ones.
Yeah.
Which is really fun to do.
Yeah.
It's really cool, and it's kind of like nature in your own hands. You can really see like the creation of the crystals themselves, and kind of like the steps that it went through to get to where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I really have to go with just like a straight lame quartz, I guess. Because I think they're just so cool and so undervalued. Which, I mean, generally, I think that's what I'm about. I kind of look at things that are undervalued and try and take value in them. Maybe not always, but I feel like I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, quartz for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's totally something in the progression of searching for rocks.
Definitely.
Just that aspect of, oh, this one's really cool, and then you find another one, throw that one out, and just the journey of that, I think is really appealing and definitely brings value to certain rocks.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's part of what makes them so special. That really brings the value. Because it's those first people who did them, and they're like, wow, this is so cool. Oh, but this piece is so much cooler. I gotta show someone this. Look at this rock I found.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Which is like something, generally speaking, I don't think we experience as much today. When you just like go off the path you're hiking, find a rock, and show everyone the rock that you found. I feel like some people would just be like, yeah, there's some over there too. Like,
yeah, it's like a childlike thing to do almost.
Yeah.
But no, I think there's something in us that gives us delight in that, and showing off a treasure that we found, that we went out and sought for. And we'll get into that soon. But before we do, one of my favorite rocks, I don't even know what it's called, but I think it's like
maybe I can help you.
Yeah, I think it's maybe like a sandstone type, but it was in Israel, and there's this huge desert area we went to with Solomon's pillars.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we went there, climbed in those rocks. There's a lot of cool formations there, but there's a place where there are tons of rocks on the ground, and so you grab one, and we just started throwing them, and they would blow up like a snowball once it hit something.
Oh yeah.
And
those are probably a type of sandstone.
Yeah, they're just so fun to play with, because you just chuck them really hard at a wall, and they just splat, So
that's a good way to get enjoyment out of rocks.
Yeah, exactly. You value the undervalued, and I just smash them and try to enjoy them.
I smash the value.
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing. In Genesis, it actually talks about, in the very beginning of creation, Genesis 4, verse 22, it talks about...
I'm pulling it up on my phone, so in case you're wondering what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I'll read the exact verse, but it talks about
Genesis
these guys.
4?
Yeah, Genesis 4:22.
All right. Sweet.
It's just this random kind of verse, but it says that these were forgers of all instruments of bronze and iron. And just having that small aspect at the very beginning is super interesting, because it is almost what you're talking about. We were meant to search for these things.
Yeah.
God created the earth with gold and with these precious stones in it, and for us to search out. And there's tons of examples of that all throughout Scripture and connections.
It's also cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's also cool that that these particular elements were there for the sake of God not just handing us everything, but giving us the creative freedom of being able to create the things in the way that we want to in order to please Him.
Yeah.
And then in order to just grow artistically, economically, and like so many other ways, just by the way these things are, because even all that stuff are still the base elements for a lot of electronics and stuff today. And it's like we still use gold. We still use like stuff like that, which is crazy.
Right. There's just such a creative aspect.
Yeah.
And built into creation for that purpose.
Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah.
But you were saying? Did you want to go off what you were?
Oh, well, just that aspect of searching for these types of treasures.
Right.
Well, have you seen any connections or remember any that really stick out to you in the Scriptures, or just even metaphors? You know, you talked about, what was that one rock? The
Moldavite.
Moldavite.
Yeah.
You know, like a metaphor that is actually so close to Christ, because he is the rock who came from heaven, you know, and has this life and spiritual vitality that he gives in himself. So
definitely.
But yeah, just wondering if any connections come up off the top of your head.
Off the top of my head, I'm thinking. I think it's in Peter, of the one verse in particular, in talking of Christ, of the stone the builder rejected, but the one that God found precious.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good verse. I'll read it real quick, and then you can say your thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 1 Peter 2:4-8. It says, "As you come to him, a living stone, rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. So the honor is for you who believe, but for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. They stumble because they disobey the word, as they were destined to do." What do you think about that?
I think, the thing I was thinking about as you were reading it was going back to the searching and discovering of rocks that we were talking about a little bit, and the inherent value or non-value that people find in stones and rocks, and that being true with Christ, like mirroring that same aspect of there either being people finding value and truth and trust in Christ, or not finding that at all and just thinking Jesus is just some other rock.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just that aspect of him being called a precious stone. And I know that in geology there is that separation. There's precious stones, there's semi-precious stones.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, there's
what
definitely a valuation chart, so to speak, bell curve kind of.
Yeah. And what makes them rare or special or precious or called precious?
Was that a question to me, or is that a
Yeah,
rhetorical?
yeah. No, what makes it? Yeah, it's a question to you.
Okay. Some of that preciousness is valuation for adornment. So for rings and brooches and other jewelry, the thing that is most desirable, like pretty much on all sides, is a stone that is well cut, well faceted, and also has like great clarity. And there are a lot of stones that are just naturally opaque, are naturally like not clear. So those are all valued pretty much. Well, a lot of them are valued as only semi-precious, that are still like nice gemstones, but they'll never be that clear color or that see-throughness that people desire the most. And the ones that are like your rubies, your sapphires, your emeralds, your diamonds, the ones that are like cream of the crop up at the top, you know what I'm saying? It's like I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but it happened. But all of those, like to an extent, can be see-through.
Yeah.
Can be transparent in certain ways, and it's. I think a lot of it has to do with how it will look in the light, and how it really showcases the aspects of a gemstone in a way that wouldn't be able to show with any other if it wasn't clear like that.
I mean, and that kind of goes back to Christ as well, just his purity, you know, and it talks about his word. His word is like a gold refined by fire 7 times, and just talking about the pureness of it.
Yeah, burn away the chaff.
Yeah, for real. And isn't there also in, like, were you saying the quality of it, like the strength of it as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. The ones that are most precious are higher on the hardness scale than any of the other ones. The ones that are, ironically, the ones that are valued the least are probably the ones that are lowest on the scale themselves. Particularly like talc, like I was mentioning, it turned into a powder for babies. Like if the bottom of the hardness scale is used for babies' butts and the top scale is used for like fingers to be wed, like there's quite a difference there.
Yeah, totally. There's a quote. All of you out there.
Quote it.
Quote it.
Write it down. Put it over your mantle.
Yeah.
Make t-shirts.
Make t-shirts. That's good stuff. I mean, just the aspect of the pureness of Jesus Christ and his durability, makes him a precious stone. And that's really seen all throughout Scripture. And in this book, that you're talking about, 1 Peter, that's almost a theme. He redeemed us, ransomed us, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with his precious blood. So like he gave himself, who is that precious stone, for us. Not, he didn't buy us back with gold or silver, but with his blood, with his life.
For sure.
So he became much more precious than any of those gold, silver.
No doubt, no doubt.
Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah, another thing I think of is that searching for treasure. It talks about Matthew 13:44 through 46, where it talks about, if you find a pearl, you'll go and sell everything you have for that. Essentially, it's talking about the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is this treasure. And there's this aspect that, as you were saying earlier, when you value something, you value it more when you seek after and find it. And the kingdom of God is this picture of this precious stone that is hidden. And we actually go and seek after it and find it, and sell everything.
Have you heard of I need to look up the actual name, but of this guy who has a lot of wealth, and he's just some dude. His name is Finn, and he has like this, or Fen. What is it? Fen treasure, Forest Fen. You ever hear of him?
No.
So he's a dude who lives towards like Rocky Mountain area, and I don't know how he got his riches, but he's pretty well off. And reason why I bring this up is it was recently found, apparently, and I mean there's a lot of like subjection to that, and people thinking that it was like he moved it and then it was put back and whatever, but he had gotten this treasure chest and filled it with a bunch of jewels and stuff, like all valued at like over $1 million. And he hid it in a specific place in the Rocky Mountain area.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote like a poem that was supposed to guide people to the spot where it's at.
Mm.
And people lost their minds about it, especially when it first started off.
Yeah.
People like, and there's been people that have been doing it for years. I think it's at least 10 years that it's been going on. But yeah, people dropped everything to try and find this thing because they're like, if I could only just find that treasure, like so many of my problems would be resolved. So many of my issues, my debts would be paid. So many of my like things I hold dear, I'll be able to take care of. And like if we were to just have that same veracity for Christ, like it shows tremendously what you hold and valuable. And I just saw that through that whole story because it's so a modern treasure hunt to have it like that and just be told it's just out there for you to just get it. And when it's that attainable, it's like I want that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. The same for Christ.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and yeah, just the fact that in Scripture, the gospel and Christ Himself is called wisdom. It's the wisdom of God. And those verses in Proverbs, there's like Proverbs, what is it, 2, 4 through 5, where it says like, seek the wisdom of God as if you're seeking treasure, as if you're seeking for silver.
Right.
And there's another one, let's see, Proverbs 8:11. It says, for wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. Take my instruction instead of silver and knowledge rather than choice gold. Like, if you put that truth into that story, you know, if people sought the wisdom of God like that.
Seriously.
Yeah. The wisdom that's much better than any jewels. But the aspect is we have to seek his wisdom. We have to seek his wisdom as if it's like silver.
The preciousness of it.
Yeah, because it is way more precious than all the jewels on this earth. So,
as many as there are.
Yeah, as many as there are. And it's like that, it doesn't stop, you know, because creation is continually creating them, right? So, I mean, that's kind of the eternal value of Christ, the precious stone, the wisdom of God. So, there's another verse, 2 Corinthians 4:7, that says, this gospel, this treasure, for those who attain it, for those who grasp it, which is believing upon Christ, grasping him. This treasure is in jars of clay. So like what you're saying, clay, I mean, that is such a common thing. No one really wants clay. They were just in jars of clay. But this treasure is there. And just as it was hidden in the field, people go seek and find it. So it's hidden in those who believe upon Christ. They may look like, I mean, we're just weak humans, frail humans. And a lot of Christians are not wise according to the world's standards.
Right.
But we hold this treasure, and it's Christ, and we hold it in jars of clay. We can be crushed, we can be overlooked, but we have this insurmountable value because we have him.
For real.
Yeah. And Colossians 2:3 says, in Christ are hidden all treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So, yeah, sweet connections.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Okay. There's also connections to the priesthood. Can you remember those?
Connections to the priesthood via rocks? We talking still?
Yeah. I know it's late, but because Aaron,
I am drawing a blank right now, so I might have something, but I'm not thinking of anything particular.
Yeah. Well, so Aaron, remember, he wears this breastplate.
Yes. Yeah.
And each stone, there's all different types of stones.
Yeah.
And
I think there's like carnelian and like, which that one's mentioned a lot in the Bible, which I didn't even realize until I was really reading the word itself. Just beautiful orange red stone. And I forget the other ones, but yeah, it's such like this ornate fixture that you see him wearing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Going through the word with like the entire book of, or like book by book, end to end of the Bible with Rachel this year. We're in Job right now, going through, so getting closer to the halfway point. But I mean, particularly everything of the Pentateuch, first 5 books of the Bible, we're just have such a better depth of understanding, and that what you're talking about in particular, like beginning of the priesthood and stuff like that, just the ornate nature of not just the temple, but for the priests themselves and what they donned is fascinating, and like
Yeah.
very much reflects the same kind of value as the well-made temple and everything else, you know.
Yeah, totally.
But
Yeah,
anyway, saying
no, it's good. It's and that ornate aspect of Aaron, you know, wearing this breastplate that has all these different stones. I think, yeah, there's sardius, topaz, carbuncle, emerald, sapphire, diamond, jacinth, agate, amethyst, beryl, onyx, jasper, gold. I mean, on each of those stones is the name of the tribes of Israel.
yeah.
And so the priests would go into the holy place wearing, like representing the people of Israel as treasures. And,
Seriously,
you know,
yeah.
it talks about later how Christ is the high priest. He's the great high priest who's greater than that of Aaron. So when Jesus comes, he enters the Holy of Holies, and he has these treasures upon his heart. And it's us. It's those he died for, and he represents us before the Father when he goes into the Holy of Holies. And that's just such a sweet picture.
Seriously.
Yeah. And just the fact that symbolized, you know, it symbolizes that we are the treasures of God, but he's made us treasures, you know. It's not necessarily of ourselves. And so he represents us before the Father as his treasure. So that's a really cool picture.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Brings a lot of depth to that symbolism, which I think at times could just look like some kind of fancy coat, and that's about it.
Right.
You know?
Yep. Yeah. And those 12 stones for each tribe, it's actually talked about. So it's not only connected with the priesthood, but it's also connected with the temple or the new heavenly city. So the first temple, it talks about in 1 Chronicles 29:2. It says, let's see, 1 Chronicles 29:2. It says, "So I've provided for the house of my God so far as I was able, the gold for the things of gold, the silver for things of silver, the bronze for things of bronze, and iron for things of iron. And then great quantities of onyx and stones for setting, colored stones, all sorts of precious stones and marble." Like this was for the temple.
Yeah.
It was laid with these precious stones, and that was another aspect of the creativity of, you know, how God created us to be. But it's also this aspect that God delights in those things. And so you have this temple created with all those stones and precious stones reflected in Revelation. So there's Revelation 21:10 through 11, where it says, And he carried me away in the spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. And later on, the wall of this heavenly city was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, seventh chrysolite, eighth beryl, ninth topaz, and 10th chrysoprase, and 11th
Chrysoprase.
Chrysoprase?
Yeah, chrysoprase.
Okay. The 11th jacinth and 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold like transparent glass. So that's just something like the Lord himself delights in. Those colors, like what we were talking about. There's nothing like those colors.
Seriously.
And, you know, it later says that God, there's going to be no need for light, no sun or moon. The glory of God gives light. So, like, I've seen the aspects of stones where you shine light on them, and it makes it, like, crazy beautiful.
Seriously.
So, just thinking about that, you know, the glory of God shining light on this heavenly city. Like, think about all the colors that will be there.
Yeah. I think one interesting aspect with that too is that might speak to restoration a little bit is the earlier part in Revelation where you were mentioning the jasper and it being this like clear structure like that of quartz, and how it's the most rare stone. How was it said? I'm gonna reread it. Having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. Jasper is not clear at all. Like naturally, it's not even a little bit. It's like this silica mixed with quartz, and it's more of like semi-precious stone than a precious stone. But that semi-precious stone is almost made more precious by the Lord himself in this restorative way, which makes sense being Revelation and where it's talking about. So I found that particularly interesting. I've never thought of that.
Yeah, and just that aspect of, there's probably some aspect of creation because of the consequence of sin, it corrupts things, even stones. And so you have dross now, you know?
Yeah.
And this picture of, the Lord making what is not so valuable stone valuable now. And, you know, taking the dross off for the silver and gold so that it's purified. And it's just such a crazy picture of redemption and how he overcomes evil with good.
Right.
So,
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. There's some other things I thought of in connection to the scriptures, and just the aspect that God is called a rock.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, if you think about the aspect of rocks, what's stronger? Yes. I mean, at least back then, it seems like there's nothing stronger.
Well, naturally, it might be best way to put it.
Yeah, naturally, according to, yeah, just the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just this picture, that even people thousands of years ago, they saw God as a rock, like his stability, durability, and as we talked about Christ, the preciousness of the rock. So the first time, do you know where the first time God is called a rock?
I don't think I would know the first time off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know. I just throw it out there.
Yeah.
But so I thought Hannah was,
Oh, yeah. But
but
it's not, huh?
it's not. So yeah, but she says in 1 Samuel 2:2, who is a rock like our God?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, oh, that's really cool. Hannah's the first one. But when I started looking more into it, actually Moses was. So,
Yeah.
which kind of makes sense. I mean, so there's that connection with the rock in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And so we should look into that a little more, because that's kind of a full subject.
Seriously.
Yeah. So Deuteronomy 32, what is it? 4. This is Moses in a song saying, "The rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. A God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he." And then just later on, in verse 15, but Jeshurun, which is another name for Israel, grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, stout, and sleek. Then he forsook God who made him and scoffed at the rock of his salvation. And this is almost a picture of what they did in the wilderness when, Moses was commanded, speak to the rock. And out of the rock came water.
Mm-hmm.
But, the Israelites, they scoffed at the rock. And it was the rock of their salvation because they were thirsty. It gave them life.
Yeah.
So there's actually this connection later on in Psalms. Usually we think of David as the one who says God is a rock, but it does go back to Moses and then Hannah. And then after her, Samuel lifts up his stone of Ebenezer.
Yeah, yeah.
Stone of help that we have the song from. Here I raise my Ebenezer. So he might have learned that from Hannah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and probably, or Moses, and then David from probably Samuel, if not.
That would make sense. Yeah, I mean, they overlapped.
Yep. So David kind of popularizes God as a rock.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of his from his kingly stature. It's something that you finally have a kingdom together. So, kind of coining that, I think that's why it hit everyone so hard by then. Finally, even though it was mentioned quite a few times,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just the connection to a strong fortress is like God as a rock.
Yeah.
And so there's connections all throughout Psalms. Lead me to a rock that is higher than I. Mm-hmm. In Psalm 61:13. But there's this actual connection between the wilderness and the rock being Christ. So Paul in 1 Corinthians calls Christ that rock that was there. So 1 Corinthians, 10, 1-4, it talks about how all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. So, yeah, there's this place in the Psalms where it kind of connects that. What is it? Psalm 78.
78.
Yeah, so Psalm 78. And then you see that verses 19 and 20. So Psalm 78, 19, 20 says, they spoke against God, saying, can God spread a table in the wilderness? He struck the rock so that water gushed out and streams overflowed. Can he also give bread or provide meat for his people?
Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of putting him to the test. Like, he rained down food from heaven and they ate,
Manna.
Yeah. And then from a rock, the thing that you'd be like, water can't come from this.
Yeah.
Water came from the rock in a wilderness. And the people were testing God, like, can he do this? Can he do that?
Mm-hmm.
But then it connects him to being a rock in verse 35. They remembered that God was their rock, the Most High God, their Redeemer. So when he afflicted them, they repented, they sought God earnestly, and they remembered this, that God was their rock.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul makes that connection. It was Christ. It was Christ then who was the rock.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, going back to the strength of the Lord.
Yep. So, yeah. All right. I think the last one we should end on is Proverbs 3:15. So, yeah, Proverbs 3:15. It's talking about a wife here.
Ooh, I have one of those.
Yeah, how long you been married now?
Like a year and a month. Well, it'll be a year and a month and 7 days in a week. A year and a month and a week.
Oh, yeah. Nice. And could you attest to this? Proverbs 3:15.
She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you can desire can compare with her.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so that one's kind of like wisdom. I mean, it makes wisdom a woman, but it's also connected to Proverbs 31:10, where it says, an excellent wife who can find? She's more precious than jewels.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing. But yeah, I mean, a wife is more precious than jewels.
More precious than the jewel you put on her finger.
Yep. For real. I mean, that's only a couple thousand.
Couple thou.
couple million.
Chop a couple mil on that ring.
Yep.
She can't lift her hand anymore. It's too heavy.
Yeah. So, Isaiah 61:10 says he's covered us with righteousness and adorned us with jewels.
Mm.
And you have this cool picture of like, yeah, our wives are more precious than jewels. And you have this picture of, well, that's how Christ sees us again. He covers his wife with his righteousness and adorns her with jewels. So, I mean, the scriptures is just so rich with this.
Yeah.
With this subject of like rock and stone. God being a rock, Christ being the precious stone that some reject, others value him as everything.
Mm-hmm.
Our wives being more than precious jewels, be more precious than jewels, and how Christ sees us as jewels, where he brings us into the Holy of Holies as a priest to represent us before Father. Man, yeah, it's just rich. It's rich with this. But that's how God is. He connects everyday simple life to who he is, theology.
Seriously.
Yeah. All right. What are your last thoughts?
My last thoughts. I think that it's so interesting to see how stones have remained precious for so long, that it's these same ones that we call precious today are the same ones that have always been called precious, and that really shows God to be a God of creativity, desires us to make creations with like all these different stones, whether that's jewelry or some electronics and interesting things that help the world to grow in a way where, whether it's economically or by construction or by technology, it's something that's never going away, and which is the sweetness of why all of this stuff we're talking about is so applicable. It's not like these stones were precious at one point and now they're not anymore. And the same with being of Christ himself, that stone that he's being represented as has always been precious, and it has not diminished in the slightest now. Well, some people might think it does, but they probably never held Christ to be precious in the first place. But I think that that's really like wrapped it up for me, and everything that we talked about is just the maintaining of the significance of all this, and how like God is still God, Lord is still Lord, Christ is still Christ, stones are still stones.
There we go. And that's how we're going to end it, baby.
Sweet.
Sweet. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on, having this conversation.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'd love to do more.
Yeah, we'll definitely do
different
more.
thing, whatever you're feeling.
All right. Well, this is Coram Deo Conversations. Thanks for listening, and like and subscribe. Bam.
Peace in.
Peace in.